Welcome back to the Data Protection Diaries, welcome back to the vlog. In today's video we are going to be talking about risk registers. Now this is something that came up on the kind of community side of the channel where we asked what kind of content people would like us to talk about, what kind of things would be of interest. And one of the things that came out was risk registers, how to populate a risk register, and really what a good risk register looks like. So that is what we are going to cover off today. If you are new to the channel, then welcome. We release videos every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Do make sure that you hit the subscribe button down in the right hand corner of your screen. Just click on the icon and you'll be able to subscribe to the channel. Of course, if you're not new, welcome back. Please do make sure that you like this video, comment your thoughts down below as well. Any kind of engagement is really appreciated. But for now, let's get on with what we want to talk about. So a risk register is a very important document for an organization to have. It allows your business to identify what areas of the business are potentially at risk and from what kind of threats. If you have a fairly large organization or you're in a fairly large business, you will probably already have a business risk register. Now that register will look at risks that face the entire business, so the way the organization is run, what impact it could have on profitability, premises, and a variety of other things. You may also have health and safety risks, you might have specific information security risks, and of course you may also have data protection related risks. There are endless ways to create a risk register, endless different formats. Some people will like to have their business risks as a completely separate register. Some people like to have their business risks and their information security risks combined together in one register. Some auditors, if you're doing ISO 27001, like to see a separate risk register for information security risks and a separate one for business risks. First thing to decide is how you want your risk register to be positioned within your business. Maintaining separate registers can be easier for some businesses. So having a business risk register that looks after just kind of the corporate risks, separate from your information security risks and your data protection risks, which can then be managed by different parts of the business, can make life a lot easier. In a small business, so for instance within iStorm there are only 13 people here, so it is easier for us to have all of our risks in one place. So we have a single risk register with a tab for our business risks and a tab for our information security and data protection related ones. That just makes it easier for us to maintain. We don't have lots of people in different departments, so we don't have lots of people dealing with lots of different risks. It just means that we as a management function can see everything in one place. Now that is not necessarily going to work for everyone, so that is the first thing that you need to identify. How are you going to record them? What format are they going to be in? And are you going to have one single register, or are you going to have lots of smaller registers managed by different parts of the business? A basic risk register at its most basic level pretty much covers the same things regardless of whether you're looking at business risks, health and safety, information security, data protection, whatever it may be. You are always going to be looking at the same core kind of headings for your tables. So the first thing that you want to be looking at is, of course, what is the risk? So what is the potential risk to the business? It could be an environmental risk. Maybe you live or work on a floodplain, or your office is near a floodplain and your office is at risk of flooding. It could be a physical security risk. Maybe you have a town centre office, it's ground floor. Maybe the risk is people being able to break in and steal your IT equipment. Maybe that same risk, being a ground floor town centre office, means that you are at risk of people looking through the windows and seeing potentially sensitive information. So the risk column is just going to have the same header, but identifying the risk that goes in it is important. The next thing that you're going to want to have is a threats column. So you have a risk, but how could that risk be materialized? How could that risk come to fruition? So again, the risk is that you have a ground floor office, people can see through the windows. How can that happen? People walking by, not having appropriate blinds in place, not having screen covers on the screens. That then brings us to our mitigation column. So what controls can you put in place to mitigate that risk and to potentially reduce that risk before you even start worrying about scoring it? Personally, for me, this is the best way to do it, because generally when you identify a risk within your business, you've probably already done something to mitigate it or to take some controls over it. Once you've done that, you're then going to be looking for, again, at a basic risk register level, at a bit of a 3x3 matrix. So your 3x3 matrix is where you're going to actually score that risk and determine what kind of impact that risk is going to potentially have on your business if it was to come to fruition. Your 3x3 risk register is going to have three things. It's going to have your likelihood and your impact. So your likelihood will be on the horizontal column, on the horizontal axis. So that's not very likely, possible, highly likely. And then across the y-axis is obviously your impact. So minimal impact, fairly moderate impact, or a high impact. Now, when you're plotting your risks on your risk register, what you need to be looking at is how likely is that risk to come to fruition, and if it did, what is the severity of that impact? So going back to something simple like being a ground floor town centre office, the likelihood of somebody walking past your windows and looking in is going to be very high. It's going to be hard to stop. People are going to want daylight. You're not always going to have the blinds closed. Now, the impact is going to vary depending on the nature of your organization. Maybe you only have computers by the windows that never have any personal data on, for instance, or don't have any information about customers or clients. Maybe those computer screens are turned away from the windows slightly so that actually it's very hard to see when people are walking past what's on the screen. Maybe you already have screen covers on and you have policies in place for people to control, alt, delete and lock their Windows screen when they're away from their computer. So where the likelihood is high, the impact may still be quite low, which means you're going to end up in the kind of bottom right hand quarter of your risk matrix, which means that actually the risk is still quite a low score. You're going to put that score into your risk register, so you now have a risk, you have a threat, and you have an understanding of how important that risk is going to be to your business. This is where it gets interesting. Let's say that you are a doctor's surgery or a medical clinic. Again, going back to the cleanest example, you have a ground floor town centre office. There's a lot of footfall, there's a lot of people walking past your office. Now let's say that the computers that are sat by the windows are being used by clinicians, they're being used by radiographers, for instance, people that are looking at healthcare, special category information, possibly medical scans, medical images, something that you can quite clearly see is relatable to an individual. Now, your likelihood isn't going to change. People are still walking past, people are still very likely to look through the window and see what's going on. But the impact is going to change. You're looking at much more sensitive information, the impact on the individual has increased, so you're going to find that while your likelihood is still at the top, actually your impact has potentially moved, and you're going to be moving up into kind of the top third of your risk matrix there, and that is where you're going to start finding that you have a high risk activity. What you then want to do is decide what you can do to reduce the risk of that impact even further. So can you move that processing, can you move those computers to a different place? Can you add in better screens? Can you ensure that blinds are pulled a full time? Worst case scenario, can you move office? Can you move around the office to make sure that that kind of information is not being processed in those windows? And that is where your risk register really comes into play when you're identifying risks around your business. The other really important thing to point out when you're doing your risk register is that risks are subjective. They are business risks. A risk that my organisation faces is not going to be the same as a risk that your organisation faces. It is your job when you are creating your risk register to identify the risks that are important to your business and identify what the impact of those risks is going to be on your organisation. It's very easy to find kind of templates and examples online, which is a very good place to start, but make sure that you are tailoring those risks and you are tailoring those scores to your organisation, because that is where you're going to be able to ensure that you are managing and mitigating your risks in the most effective fashion. Another key point to remember is that your risks are very unlikely to change over time. So if you have identified a physical security risk, for instance, that, again, back to the town centre office example, people can potentially walk in off the street. Maybe you don't have a receptionist, maybe you don't have swipe card access on your main front door, because let's say it's a shared office. So your mitigating control may be to have swipe card access to your part of the office, so you can secure your shared part of the office. Once that risk has been identified and that control has been inputted and that risk has potentially been mitigated, it is very unlikely that that risk is ever going to change. So you may find when you're reviewing your risk register that actually, fundamentally, your key basic risks don't change. Your scores don't change, your likelihood doesn't change. The reason that may change is maybe you move offices, maybe you move premises. Now you're going to have to carry out a risk assessment, you're going to have to re-look at the risks that the organisation faces and make sure that you're re-scoring those. The other important thing is when you are bringing in new activities, when you are changing the way your business works, be it introducing a new system, be it introducing working from home, for instance, which has obviously been a huge change during COVID, that means that your organisation's risks are going to change. Those are the kind of things that on a more regular basis you want to be adding into your risk register, scoring and keeping an eye on, either within your teams or within the senior management within the organisation, because those are the things, those kind of changes need to be monitored, need to be controlled, and those risks need to be assessed and managed to make sure that the organisation stays safe even when things are flexing and moving. Now, as always, this is a fairly succinct view on the world. This is not a video on how to do a complete risk assessment or how to build a risk framework within your organisation, but I hope that this has given you kind of an indication of what a basic baseline risk register can look like and why it's important to have one within your organisation. Of course, if you do have any questions, please do comment them down below, get in touch, and you'll see the email at the end of this video, or of course you can also get in touch with us here at the office and we'd be very, very happy to help you. Thank you very, very much for watching. I say, if you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. Hit this like on this video, all those wonderful things, and we look forward to seeing you again next week. Thanks so much.